Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I hope my streaming setup works because, as you might be able to tell, I'm not streaming from my usual home. I'm on vacation and visiting family, and I was extremely busy over the last 2 weeks. So, the last stream is, I believe, exactly 2 weeks ago, maybe even a little bit longer. I missed a bunch. Most specifically, I missed like huge iOS 19 design leaks. If, of course, you want to believe John Prosser from Front Page Tech. Personally, I don't believe him that often, but hey, at least he is committed to it right now. So we'll have to see how ultimately like his leaks pan out. They do line up with a lot of what Mark Gurman has said. But again, we'll get to that. So I apologize for being on a somewhat irregular streaming schedule. I will be returning to a more regular one, at least for the foreseeable future. 2, maybe even 3 streams per week. So if you've missed me, now is a good time to join. Now is a good time, of course, to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. You guys might have missed me, but you probably haven't forgotten that I love interacting with a lively live stream, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, debating you guys sometimes. I'll deal finally with Discord now that I have a little bit more time. I'll set up a Discord for us if I deem the community big enough for any of that. It depends also a little bit on when can I actually stream, because if I stream at a very inopportune time for you guys, kind of doesn't make sense though. But yeah, by the end of April, you will have a lot of answers in that regard. Yeah, and of course, whenever you catch me live, consider leaving me a super chat or super sticker. Big shout out here to Max, a longtime supporter now, I believe, for almost a year of the channel, leaving a generous €5.99. Very strong currency right now. I'm doing the Trump right now. Very strong currency. I'm doing the butthole mouth. Invest in the euro. It's even better than my meme coin. Saying super glad to see you back. Super glad to see you back here, man, as well. Saying I'll try to join in later from the gym. I just came from the gym, so I fully understand it. Believe I haven't streamed in a year or so, like around 3 p.m. German time. So yeah, I understand. And plus, the algorithm is probably kicking my butt for taking 2 weeks off. So even if I'm completely alone today, that will be completely fine by me. You guys will be able to find me. I am still off Twitter. Maybe I'll create an account just for the YouTube stuff, but Jesus, I hate anything Twitter related. There's Threads, there's Blue Sky, there's a little bit of other stuff. Plus, of course, you can see it here if you hit the notification bell. Yeah, but yeah, so thank you, Max. So, yeah, wishing us all a nice stream. Yeah, and wishing you a nice workout at the gym. Hopefully, it's successful. I'm pretty tired after mine, but I still thought, why not take an hour or so of energy that you have still left and then stream? So yeah, thank you to anyone who finds the streams again. We'll deal with finding everyone again after the hiatus. So we have a ton of topics to discuss. I will not be able to deal with everything that I have missed in the last 2 weeks today, but probably I'll stream again on Wednesday, and by that time we should be able to accumulate enough stuff. Plus, not everything is that relevant. Plus, we are now just 2 months away, actually less than that, from DubDub. So while I will keep covering software leaks in regards to Apple, I will probably just focus on like preparing you guys for DubDub. And by the way, if my camera is shaking a little bit, I'm not doing like a green grass director shit or whatever. I am on a pretty unstable table here. Yeah, but that's about it for the intro stuff. We do have plenty of things to talk about. I would like to start with some good news in regards to Apple broadly. Obviously, I have covered the tariffs before the 2-week hiatus, which of course means, as everything in the Trump world, 2-week-old news are completely outdated. They have no relevance anymore. Since then, tariffs on China have been increased to 145%. And since then, China has retaliated with a 125% counter tariff against the United States. Ever since then, the United States has actually created exemptions for tariffs against China, which include crucial electronics like smartphones and laptops. So that's good news for Apple. Also, tariffs against countries like India and Vietnam, where a lot of other Apple production is happening, are mostly paused. And I say mostly because paused for Trump means they're down to 10% rather than 27% and 46%. So I will be covering more breaking news when it comes to the tariff here on this channel, but this will not be the priority of this channel anytime soon. Not because I am afraid of political stuff. I am not that kind of guy. You guys know I'm plenty political. I'm pretty outspoken about being very center left and stuff like that. But it's just happening so fast. And to be quite honest, so much of it is so stupid that it's not something I want to waste time on. But obviously, we have talked about how the tariffs might negatively impact Apple. Well, for now, it seems like they might not. And when we are looking back actually at the last quarter, which is quarter one of 2025, we actually see some pretty good news for Apple. Apparently, it's at least partially thanks to the new $600 iPhone 16e. This is coming from Counterpoint Research, a very good research firm. That being said, they are, of course, going off guesstimates here. Apple does not reveal super concrete numbers for the iPhone. They reveal revenues, and that kind of helps. And of course, you can do like research, counterpoint research. But yeah, you can like go to individual stores or more like supply chain sources, big store chains and stuff like that. And then you can kind of estimate how much is being sold. Of course, you can also just ask the broader public. If you have like 1,000 people to ask from, maybe that's enough. So these numbers are not perfect, at least not for Apple, but they are roughly correct. So this is why we do cover when they come up. And you guys know I'm not like finance obsessed here, at least not when it comes to Apple. When I started this channel, I actually sold off all my Apple and related tech stocks because I wanted to stay completely neutral. I know this channel is a hobby. It's not a big deal. I'm still primarily a doctor. I wanted to say and shit like that, but that's what I am in terms of like my profession. But I am taking this seriously, and I am trying to really inform you guys and give you a fair representation of my own ability, like in my own knowledge in regards to Apple, right? I will get some stuff wrong, but never because I have like a vested interest to like make Apple look better than they are, or make Apple look worse than they are, or to promote a competitor, or to downplay the success of a competitor. If I ever get something wrong, it will be a genuine mistake by me. It's just human error. And yeah, this is why I do like to cover numbers. But usually Apple's sales are kind of pretty stable and kind of predictable these days, even if they grow sometimes a little more than expected, or they shrink a tiny bit more than expected. None of that is ever like enough for me to say, ooh, Apple best ever, or Apple doomed forever now, right? But when it comes to actually surprising numbers, I do like to cover them here. And in this case, this is Apple taking up the top spot during the first quarter of the year. Now, of course, if you imagine that the iPhone comes out in September, that's the third quarter of last year, then has its peak sales in quarter four, right? Because that's holiday sales, at least in the Western market. And then in Q1, it still performs reasonably well. Chinese New Year, still some pent-up demand, if not everything was able to be met during the holiday quarter. We see the first discounts, be it through sometimes Apple officially, at least in countries like China. or through third-party retailers, or even stuff like Amazon, which I guess is kind of a third-party retailer. So Q1 definitely underperforms Q4 and Q3. However, not only does it underperform like relative to Apple's own quarters, but also in respect to the rest of the industry, because Q1 is usually when we see a huge spike in sales from Samsung's latest phones, the Galaxy S series. We also see a bigger availability for Android flagships based on the latest processors, in this case, the 8 Elite. Now, granted, the 8 Elite was available pretty early last year, so like definitely like by October, November, we had some devices already out. But now we really do have everything from the Vivo X200 series to the Oppo Find X8, even some foldables and stuff like that. So Q1 is usually when Apple not just underperforms themselves, but also performs relatively poorly in comparison to the rest of the industry. And now that's seemingly not the case, because for once in a while, Apple has launched a new smartphone in Q1. And in comparison to their previous iPhone SE sales, which also happened in roughly Q1 ish, for one, the iPhone 16e launched earlier than most iPhone SEs, which usually launched around April. But I would also argue the iPhone 16e, except for maybe the very first iPhone SE, is probably the most ambitious, cheap iPhone in a while. And the reason why it is that is because it's not a cheap iPhone, right? Yeah, $600 is not terrible in comparison to the rest of the iPhone lineup, but the SEs used to be 430 bucks. So this is definitely where inflation, but also a different positioning in the market, should have come kind of back to bite Apple, but seemingly not. So Apple has taken roughly 19% of the global smartphone market share of Q1 2025. Some people say it's thanks to the iPhone 16e. When you look at the breakup by brands, you will find that Samsung is down 5%. That's in overall sales. That's not in market share, which leads, of course, Samsung losing its 20% market share position down to 18%. You see a lot of Chinese brands picking up some steam. The other category is just incredibly huge, which is when you consider ask yourself, because I know most people watching me like are from countries like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. So I know that in your markets, it's actually quite common to have something from another brand, right? And this is usually where you will find the highest value, like relative between the hardware and the price. But here in the West, it's incredibly uncommon for one to find much beyond Samsung and Apple. But then, like, if you look beyond like Xiaomi and Vivo, like, and Oppo, especially, like, yeah, like these five feel like literally every phone out there. Of course, in the past, we had HTC, LG, Motorola. All of those brands became either irrelevant or they were absorbed into something else. I guess the only other brand in the West that truly matters is the Google Pixel. And even then, I would argue it matters a lot more like to the tech media rather than the broader tech public. But yeah, it's a very interesting detail if you're trying to analyze it. Like just the difference that you perceive from like a Western perspective, like what I see, and then of course what people in more emerging markets see, where like much cheaper brands have a much higher percentage of the overall smartphone market. Jan joining the chat saying, hoo hello to my German audience member. Always love you joining, especially at weird times like today. Like I know with school or work, 3:15 p.m. is still not a great time. So thank you very much for still finding me. So the global smartphone market grew 3% year over year in Q1 2025, but Counterpoint has revised its annual forecast and now expects a slight decline for the full year. That's, of course, tariff related. I've already talked plenty about that. So you see, Apple, of course, kept its market share of 19% by growing roughly in line with the rest of the market. You see some other brands grew faster than Apple, but because Samsung actually sold less than last year in a growing market, that resulted in them losing some market share. And yeah, I would love to see what the iPhone 16e launch means for average sales price for iPhones. But regardless, I do think this is overall some pretty good news, and that's why I wanted to start with it. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about the broader global economics, the tariff stuff, and free trade and political stability. So, and I know we are primarily a tech-focused channel, an Apple-focused channel. So I just wanted to bring you, amongst all that uncertainty, a little bit of good news. Jan saying, you bought yourself an iPhone 16 Pro Max. You wanted to wait for an iPhone 17, but you don't know how expensive it might get. I assume you're referring also to the international situation right now. And the 16 Pro Max is not going to go bad by the time a 17 Pro Max launches. Yeah, I actually fully agree. Now, for me, I like, to me, I'm still way too happy with my 15 Pro Max to just upgrade it to the 16 Pro Max. Like, my expectation is in Germany, I actually wouldn't expect the 17 series to be much more expensive. And part of that is I actually do expect brands to offset some losses in the United States, and there will be losses in the United States, whether we are dealing with 10% tariffs, 20% tariffs, or at some point tariffs like 27, 46, 55, or 4% might return, right? The United States will have a contraction in its purchasing power because of the higher cost of shipping and goods. And Europe, Australia, South Korea, Japan, all of those countries will be impacted. You can see that, like, the PS5 just got more expensive, and it didn't get more expensive in the United States. It got more expensive in like Europe, the UK, and Australia. But the reason why I don't expect the 17 Pro Max specifically, or the 17 series, to be that much more expensive here in Europe is because the euro is actually up versus the dollar. Euro versus USD. It's 1.13. Yeah, it's close to 1.14 basically. Should be like 1.36 or 7 or something like that. And that's a notable increase over like the last month alone. So Apple, I don't think it would make sense for Apple to like go super ham on pricing. Now, if we go by like European pricing for once, actually, because we usually like to look at USD. Don't show that. So if we look at the Pro Max pricing, now, of course, we do have the 20% value added tax over the United States, or 19% to be more correct. So if you actually consider something like the 1 terabyte version, which is what, $1,500 dollars, right? If you consider the exchange rate, now you're very much in the positive thanks to the stronger euro. Yes, of course, even if you consider the value-added tax, but then again, many U.S. states still will force you to pay a VAT. It's just not included in the market price on the website. So yeah, I definitely think that Apple shouldn't increase prices too much. $50 here or there, make it this start at around 1,500. This one 1,750, and this one $2,000. Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening, but not much more than that. Plus, I do believe it's kind of like overdue for us to get rid of like 512 gigabytes. Just let the phone start at 256, consolidate those two versions, price 1 terabyte maybe $100 lower, and then offer a 2 terabyte version for another $300, or hell, even 400. For the enthusiast. And I think you will successfully increase average sales price and profits, and simultaneously you will actually give to those who want the 1 terabyte model, like I do, a better deal. Because right now, I kind of don't use much more than 300 or 400 gigabytes, so I'm kind of inclined to go back to 512. But if there wasn't the 512 gigabyte version, but I could get 1 terabyte for just a tad cheaper, maybe like 1850 in euro, that I think would work pretty well for me. Guys, I see we have a couple more people joining. As always, and I know I've already said it at the beginning of the stream, subscribing, liking, sharing, but specifically, I implore you to comment so I know who is back. I know what your opinions are. I know what the topics you are that you want me to cover, right? I've been very busy over the last 2 weeks. I've been pretty tired. So just having you guys here, letting me know what you're actually interested in, what you would like to discuss, right? That to me is 10 times more important even than any money. But of course, if you want to throw a coin to your favorite streamer, you can see how Max Maximus left a generous €5.99 super chat. So yeah, all your support is very much welcome. Of course, you can also become a direct supporter right here on YouTube. But just having you comment, just getting your opinions, that's what matters the most to me. Yeah, that was a little bit of a deflection, but so Jan, I hope you're very happy with your 16 Pro Max. I hope my prediction that the 17 Pro Max is not going to be much more expensive than this, at least in Europe, is gonna pan out, but we'll have to see. Anything can happen with the current US administration. With who knows also how production might be impacted. Look, I know Xinjiang. No, it's not Xinjiang. What is the area where Apple produces in China? It's basically its own city. Xinjiang is the province with Uyghur Muslims. I cannot think of it, right? But like, if China gets really, really pissed at the US, there is a chance that they might halt production by certain US companies. Now, they are also very dependent on investment from companies like Apple. And if Apple pulls out, there is a chance they just fully transfer to India and Vietnam. And they might just overtake even factories by companies like Foxconn. Like, there could be a giant geopolitical issues if they try doing something like that. But at this point, nothing is impossible. We might not see a 17 series this year. Who knows? Yeah, but that was just a tiny bit of like somewhat politically related stuff, and just broader discussion of iPhone sales. That being said, of course, we have a lot more to talk about than just iPhone sales. You already see some mentioning of iOS redesigns, in this case, watchOS redesigns, which would be based on the redesigns we are expected to see on iOS 19. AR glasses, VR products. I've actually bit the bullet, guys, and one extra reason, if you needed one to support me financially, I've actually subscribed to the tech newsletters on Bloomberg. I believe it's 11 euros. So that includes the Power On newsletter from Mark Gurman. So we can read through it together. I don't have to wait for a day or two until it's archived or until it's re-summarized by websites like 9to5Mac or Mac Rumors. So yeah, hope you guys appreciate that. But before we go into any of that, let me focus on the news that I missed the hardest, and that is John Prosser from Front Page Tech is talking more about the supposed iOS 19 redesign. That's, of course, after Mark Gurman also came out after his previous video on this and said, you know what, buddy, I think you have like an outdated version, or maybe you are having some wrong sources here. So John Prosser basically took that personally, strike back, and is now presenting us a more in-depth view of the redesigns we're expecting for iOS 19. No jumping on the table, Bella. Because there are way too many cables here. It will drive me insane if my cat jumps on the table.
Hey, I'm glad you clicked on the video.
Okay, so I will have to. Otherwise, I think I'll actually break your guys' ears. Let me know if my audio is all right, if my video is all right, if the streaming is stable. I know today I feel like I'm a brand new streamer with so many worries today, but it's probably better just to make sure everything works for you. And then in the next few streams, I'll calm down a little now that I'm actually back.
You're about to see the biggest iOS leak ever. We already dropped an early preview of iOS 19 in our last video, but about an hour after that went live, Mark Gurman, arguably the most reputable Apple leaker, this guy, claimed that we either faked our iOS 19 leak or had an old, incomplete build. And we took that personally, so we got our hands on a new build. And by new build, I mean the rest of it.
So this is actually a counter that doesn't quite work to anybody who's really familiar with software development. You can have a full build, a full leak that is old and therefore irrelevant. So depending on the stage of development from where they took this iOS build, it could still be irrelevant. It doesn't really fully counter what Mark Gurman says. However, it does add some detail that to me actually suggests that their previous leaks might have had more standing, but I also think that they themselves didn't actually fully understand the prior leaks that they were covering. And in fact, one of my own points of criticism, if my hands disappear down here, that's because I'm patting my cat, because she always gets really agitated when I stream, my little Bella. So to prevent her from jumping on the table or to jumping into my face and provoking my allergies, I'll have to be petting her on the side for probably the duration of the stream to come. Make me so aggressive.
I've been coming up hot for a minute.
What we are about to show you here is the most complete build of iOS 19 yet, a version as close to final as you're going to see before WWDC happens in June. Now, for the sake of credibility, the timeline of events here is important. You should know that back in January, we were the first to leak and show off the brand new camera app coming to iOS 19, featuring a total redesign that looked a lot less like iOS and more like Vision OS.
So I've already covered some of the stuff here, obviously, because we've covered like their individual videos. One, I have said that I do not quite like how some of the user interface elements do not fully line up with each other. Right, you can see like this line is over this line. Before that, it was under this line. Now it could still be possible if the translucency effect is good, then it doesn't have to fully line up with each other. Just let me show you guys briefly my little Bella. There she is. Say hi. She'll probably get aggressive right now. Mr. George Best, haven't seen you in a while. Hello there, Mark. I hope you're doing well. I actually am. As I said in the beginning of the stream, I'm on vacation visiting my family, and I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, definitely long time no see.
Like Vision OS, the system that runs on Apple's Vision Pro. You might have heard of it. That was the first instance of the claim being made that iOS 19 may be receiving a full redesign and look a lot like Vision OS. And 52 days later, our friendly neighborhood Grumpty Dumpty dropped his own report claiming that iOS 19 would feature a Vision OS style redesign.
Now, it should be said, Vision OS based and visionOS inspired, obviously, different things. I've said time and time again, I think it's very likely that Apple will get inspired by their own work on visionOS. I do hope it doesn't become a carbon copy. And as I've said also in my prior streams, I just think that there is a notable difference in how you perceive a visionOS, which is inside the headset on top of a pass-through video layer from the cameras, and how you perceive iOS, iPadOS, macOS, right, which is on a two-dimensional screen that you tap on directly, right? Jesus Christ, her tail is like directly so much hair. Yeah, Bella, I get it. It's April. You're losing a lot of hair, but Daddy is allergic.
Imagine that. Then on March 25th, we dropped a video.
So yeah, what I'm basically trying to say, whenever I see like mockups that show like fully circular icons, I cringe a little, not because I think it's impossible, but because I genuinely don't like fully circular things as part of iOS. Do I think they're horrible? No, but I do prefer like the rounded squares or like the squircles basically, rather than full-on circles as part of iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS. Does visionOS need circles in comparison to the rest? No, but visionOS is sufficiently new that this kind of change doesn't really bother me. Plus, I don't own a Vision Pro.
Showing you, not just telling you, even more of iOS 19. Mockups we made from scratch based on material from actual sources within Apple. We recreate
So
what
that
we
is very
see
important because it's very easy to get certain stuff wrong when you're doing it this way, right? Especially very like intricate details, especially like transparency and translucency layers. So I'm not saying they're faking it, but you should still not take it as like the final leak, right?
to ensure that those sources are protected. And we made sure to mention in that video that we were only showing you what we had seen up to that point. After all, we're showing you an operating system that won't be fully released to the public until September.
True.
It won't even be shown off in any official capacity until June.
True.
So of course, it's early. And Apple does a lot of clever hiding. Let's say you're an Apple engineer. Some elements of the OS are forked off into separate teams to prevent a full build from being in your possession, which is also why we never really see iOS leak early. Some of the elements are especially hidden.
There's also a higher degree of responsibility for the software, right? The people actually testing it in public are still Apple engineers, right? While the people who will be leaking the hardware to you, those are primarily like supply chain people. So they obviously, while they could stand to lose a lot if Apple finds out and goes after them and sues them, it's very much a different relationship between them and the final product than a software engineer who only has access to it because he is actually working on it. He actually has some solid skin in the game.
From you, but maybe from prying eyes while it is in your possession. Make note of that. That's going to be important in a couple minutes. And after Mark Gurman decided to go out of his way to insert himself into the coverage about our leak by calling it outdated or fake or whatever, it conveniently let us and our sources know that there was more to find.
Well, yeah, nobody denied that. I mean, you yourself probably didn't expect it was only the camera app that got a redesign and the messages app.
Thanks, Mark. Let's get started. Let's just give you the big one up front, shall we? In every concept of a visionOS style overhaul that has been made, everyone defaults to showing round icons.
Yeah, again, because people don't have an understanding of different platforms need different aesthetics to both differentiate themselves, but also because they are different in usability and the feel that Apple wants to evoke from you. It's not to like attack any of those people. It just also works better for the thumbnail to say, oh, iOS 19 is getting a huge redesign. If you don't actually have new icons to leak, you'll just show the visionOS icons, and you will see some of them, like nodes, are already different, not just in shape, but also overall design. But something like the Photos app, right? What exactly would you be leaking here if you just showed the regular rounded square icon from iOS, right? Instead, you leak the circle from visionOS. So it's also a very self-serving move to show that.
On the home screen. Why? Well, because visionOS has round icons.
True.
Duh. The issue with that is that in every version of iOS 19 that we had seen from our sources, not once did we see evidence of round icons. So last time we showed you the iOS 19 home screen, we made sure to mention that round icons could happen in the final version, but we were just being honest by telling you that we hadn't seen any. That changes today. Remember that little note I told you to make a couple minutes ago? Yeah, it's time to get that out. Turns out that in the build we had seen, Apple was hiding new icons behind the old ones. At first glance, everything looks somewhat normal. I assume this is a precautionary measure that's taken just in case a device with this build is seen out in public. If a stranger glanced at it, nothing is out of the ordinary. But if you tap on the icon, yeah, so here's the deal. What we actually saw were icons that had a corner radius of about 30, give or take. So not a square icon, but also not a perfect circle either. There is a chance that the way we saw it was a glitch or something.
It should be noted that the way they're showing this, it would create like somewhat misaligned stuff. You're also like really wondering about stuff like the clock app, where I'm like, really, right, like this shape is really weird. So my assumption is, of course, plus the Mail app doesn't even look fully centered, the icon. Mr. George Best leaving, wait, is that Jordanian dirham? I don't know why, saying, I don't, let me know which currency this is. Because I don't want to Google right now. I don't know why people think consistency is bad. iOS layout is already good as it is. Don't change for the sake of changing. Same goes for iPhone 17. I fully agree. I have been on the train like, look, I want good designs. And sometimes good designs do require you to let go of certain old shit, right? And try something new. But just randomly switching it up or saying, oh, I randomly want to take design elements from this completely other platform that works in those completely different ways, that to me is just something I don't understand. So, nice. Visiting your mom as well. So I'm visiting my mom. You're visiting yours. Great. Jesus Christ. No way. Bro, I knew so much Arabic a few years ago. Now I cannot say hello? No way. I think my brain is just farting. So thank you so much. But yeah, Jesus, that's embarrassing. I knew so much Arabic a few years ago, especially like even with like Jordanian like accents, more like than like your high Arabic. But that's neither here nor there. So thank you so much. I fully agree. Consistency is good. I also think, by the way, that rounded squares are the best icon design. I think the only one that is technically better are freed rounded squares. And I mean stuff like, do I have one here? Like, look here, right? Like my quit all icon here in the dock, right? You can see it's a rounded square, 100%. But the actual little Android, I guess, right? His head is sticking slightly out, and the platform that he is standing on is sticking slightly out, right? I think that macOS, with its higher degree of freedom, while still pursuing this uniform design language, that to me is peak design. I do actually prefer the icons one generation back that were even more free than these ones. But for iOS specifically, I think this would be peak, to have rounded squares, not that rounded as we see here, and then just a tiny bit of freedom to have like like small elements peeking out. You see that also with stuff like the GarageBand icon, of course, which of course has like the guitar sticking out a little bit of the rounded square. So yeah, I fully agree. Consistency is great, especially if your foundation is great, right? I mean, for example, if Apple were to randomly change all of its emojis, right, you would be looking at them like, why? You literally have like the industry's best, right? But if Samsung said, oh, we are gonna completely change the emojis we're using, you would be like, you know what, man? That's a good choice, right? So it very much depends on your baseline. Mr. George Best, I can relate. I was speaking so much English, my uncles are now teaching me Arabic like I'm 5 years old. That happens to me sometimes with Russian, which is my first language. Bring me back iOS 6 icons. Now, those are beautiful. Yes, but they also work in the context of iOS 6, right? Of the skeuomorphic design language. I don't think actually that those icons would vibe too well with the flat OS look. Now, I know some people also prefer the older OS look. I personally think it was a little bit too textured. I probably would prefer some medium between like fully flat and fully skeuomorphic. Then I think there is bullshit like neumorphism, which everybody has like a different definition of. But yeah, like to me, I really like what iOS is currently offering. Like if I dislike something about iOS, it's more about specific implementations. Like I don't quite like notification center, I guess. I would actually love for notification center to be blurred in the background. I think that would look dope. But I guess I could do that myself by using like a blurry wallpaper. But yeah, I don't really have any big like dislikes of what iOS is currently doing. And by the way, I find it funny how so many people who have been saying like, oh, iOS needs its macOS Snow Leopard release, no new features, which by the way is not true. Just because that was said in one key slide in a keynote that Apple presented macOS, Snow Leopard had a ton of deep structural rewrites from new APIs being used to fully going all in on 64-bit, right? Leaving a lot of older tech behind, which many people wouldn't like if Apple suddenly like cut off 3 or 4 generations of older iPhones. Plus, like macOS Snow Leopard was not perfect day one. It was updated for over 2 years with several new releases. And then by the end, it was kind of known to be really stable. She actually jumped on the table. She gets nervous when I talk to nothing. So don't think I'm ever aggressive to my little Bella. I love her more than life, but I don't want her biting any of the cables, electrocuting herself or shit like that. So she definitely cannot be jumping on the table.
Was a glitch or something, but a corner radius of about 30 also happens to match other elements in the system. The icons that make it into the final version may in fact be circles. And either way, I'm sure they'll all...
Or like this is also the issue, right? Because I would much more prefer to know what the icons actually look like internally, because, for example, like the Safari icon from visionOS is notably different. The settings icon is notably different. Mainly it's translucent, but it has like a little bit of a 3D effect to it. To me, it's just I would much more care about this than the shape of the icon. So the fact that the community has made this the biggest topic, like are the icons fully circular or rounded squares? I honestly, that's a little bit sad to me because I would much more prefer to know like the actual iconography rather than the shape of the icons.
I'll get a facelift and not just be iOS 18 icons with the corners cut off like an Uncrustable. I just haven't seen them. But all I can do from the position I'm in is tell you what we saw, and we did not see perfect circles. I guess all we can say confidently is, yes, iOS 19 will have new icons. Okay, we have so much more to show you. This is a big drop, but we're going to have to show you after today's sponsor. No matter, writing to your manager is a list on your we show today. Overhaul, take a look at some of the new system animations here and toggle switches. Oh, and in the lock screen, it's subtle, but we started to notice that some of the on-screen elements shimmered as you moved the device.
So that is so believable to me. And that has been my main criticism of John when he showed off that iMessage leak, right? The Messages app, where he said, oh, look, there's like these like icons are grainy or whatever. I'm like, no, that's a poor render, or that's like a static screenshot of a moving design element. Like the fact that we have like the parallax effect, which we know Johnny Ive and probably most of the team that he left behind loves. The fact that we have a translucency slash reflection effect here that responds to parallax movement of your phone, that to me is perfect. That screams Apple to me. That screams actually interesting to me, and that also screams to me that iOS 19 might actually be something you will need to feel in your hand before you create a comprehensive opinion. Photos, screenshots will definitely not be enough, and even videos might not be, because you will see the user interface react to something that you are not doing, and it will make it feel disconnected from your own intent. But if you're holding it, and you will see certain UI elements shimmer more, like some of the reflections move around, maybe there will even be like some system shadows, right? Maybe you drag and drop something, maybe you will have a shadow underneath, the way that visionOS drops a shadow directly onto like your visual feed. That is cool, and that is something I would love to see evolve as a design language over the next few years, right? I don't think that Apple will get it all right the instant they launch iOS 19. I think similar to iOS 7, they will need 1 or 2, maybe even 3 years of fully figuring out what works, what might consume too much power, what might consume too much RAM in terms of effects, right? What might just not look too great once you consider like what's actually in the background, right? Once you overlay a transparency layer over something, that can look very differently depending on what's underneath. So I apologize, I'm going insane with just how needy my cat is. I guess I'll just get her to say hello one more time. Hello. Yeah. So, but this is something that I've pointed out when John Prosser showed that original leak, and I believe I feel fully vindicated here.
Not sure how prevalent this is across the entire OS, but it does help sell the glassy illusion that they're aiming for here. Let's talk about Control Center.
By the way, just so you know,
it's
just
the same,
from
with
one
some
patting,
minor
right?
tweaks,
I've
I guess.
already
Here's
cleaned
the
like
old
my
Control
hand
Center,
multiple times
and
under
here's
the table.
the new one. Spot the changes? It's in the brightness and volume.
It's also the elements look a little bit more glass-like, right?
Sliders. They're rounder now. Wow, such change. Many impress. In the newer build that we saw compared to the first one that we saw, animations and elements are way more fleshed out now. Let's take a look at the music app. There's a new dock that you're going to find on the bottom of...
So interesting, he does leave out like the multitasking bar right below. That might just be an aesthetic choice, or maybe it disappears actually.
Apple's native apps. Internally, I believe Apple is just seeing this as a new version of what they call tab view, and it works just as you'd expect. I will say that because of the animation style here, everything feels way more fluid and bouncy.
Yeah, this is actually something I'm also inclined to believe, and that's because he does actually smartly liken it to tab view, which obviously we know that Apple has a system to deal with many multiple like app parts, right, on iPad and on Mac, basically tabs. And on iOS, that's not quite the case. But instead of giving you obviously an iPadOS-like look to deal with it, they still try to give you something that is a unique take on this. And this is why I genuinely dislike all the people saying iOS and macOS need to merge, right? We need all the standard input elements, like your standard mouse cursor on iPadOS. You need your standard like 3 dots in the corner to close off apps and minimize them. Like, if those people, like, it's not like those people are always wrong, but those people always have the wrong approach, which is you still need to try something new, in my opinion, if you're moving to something that is very different, right? An indirect input system like a mouse is very different from a direct input system. An input system that is based in a VR three-dimensional like body or like system works very different from like just tapping a two-dimensional screen that you hold right in front of yourself. So I'm not trying to say that, oh, Apple needs to reinvent the wheel every time, but I always find it weird how people are like, oh, that was solved on the Mac 2 decades ago or on Windows, and I'm like, yes, but it's a very different system with very different needs and with a very different like tolerance to like user knowledge, right? It's genuinely trying to onboard people with very little PC experience. This is why those iPad, oh, what is a PC ads exist. It's not because the iPad replaces the PC in every perfect way. It's because it's genuinely supposed to be a new paradigm in how you perceive a computer.
It kind of feels like it takes inspiration from the dynamic island animations,
Yep.
if you ask me, and this is consistent throughout. A really great example of the new tab view is in the App Store. You'll find the new tab view in the phone app, the TV app, all of Apple's native apps, but it will also have support in third-party apps, for the sake of continuity, I'm sure. Another subtle change from the last build we showed you is in the Messages app. The search field is now, get this, placed at the bottom of the display while you're looking at your threads of conversation.
And this is also where I compliment other operating systems like Samsung's One UI and the fact that at least in the years leading up to like One UI 5 and stuff like that, they genuinely introduced a lot of design elements or more like placement paradigms that made the system very easy to use in one hand. And I'm glad that something like the search bar can migrate from the top to the bottom.
Tapping this will let you search the usual conversations, documents, photos, and videos shared. You know, the Settings app is ever so slightly visually different, which you might be wondering about. Not different enough.
Yeah, so we do have the toggles from visionOS. That makes sense. The toggles on visionOS are generally gorgeous.
Where I think a normie would even notice, but different enough to...
This one feels a little bit too elongated. But I cannot be sure, right? It is a recreation after all.
Where you'd be like, oh, hey, new. Overall, though visually things are different and may operate a titch differently, I don't think we're looking at a massive new learning curve here for users, which honestly is ideal. This is a year where we're getting brand new looks to the iPhone lineup, which we also leaked, link to those videos in the description, and a new look to the software.
And we might get a lot more functionality in other software pieces, which we'll cover later on, like iPadOS 19, right? And don't forget, iOS 19 is designed to also be more in lockstep with the design of an operating system like the newest macOS version. So simultaneously, those changes that you see on iOS 19, some of them might actually be even bigger changes on macOS, because macOS right now has a very different control center than iOS. So if iOS gets a slightly visually tweaked control center, now for macOS, that actually means getting a completely new control center. So the learning curve, especially for a person deep in the ecosystem, will still be there.
That's a lot. And it's
Apple will have to be careful to not make it too crazy. Plus, they genuinely don't want to ship something that will need like a ton of refinement right away, right? Yeah, sure, they will want to work on system performance and stability and fixing bugs and everything else like that. But if there are design changes that are genuinely bad, they probably want to like put as few of those as possible into the system and then still give themselves room to experiment with iOS 20 and 21 down the line.
a lot all at once. Something like that might be cool for nerds like you and I, but Apple can't afford to place too much friction into the hands of their users.
True.
There are billions of iPhones on the market. A massive change to software, seemingly all overnight to most consumers, would be big bad to happen. These people are buying iPhone after iPhone after iPhone year after year after year because it's familiar to them. There is no relearning. There's no risk. A visual overhaul to iOS that focuses more on the visual part other than the usability part is generally going to be the safest move for Apple here. Once the new look is established, then let's start implementing new features slowly but surely. I mean, we don't even have all the features from the last batch they promised, so like, do you really want new features too? There is one new feature that we can tell you about today in this video, and it's in the camera app. This will be exclusive to the Pro models this year. Why? Well, I don't actually know, because it's a feature that Samsung launched on the Galaxy S4 in 2013. Within the new camera app, and so long as you have an iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max, you'll be able to record with your rear-facing camera and front-facing camera at the same time. So in June, when Apple takes the stage for WWDC to officially show you iOS 19, along with the new redesign, the new functions, the new animations, and the new features, you'll be able to say you saw it on FPT first. So how about that, Mark?
So the last feature, generally cool. It's not something that I see myself using every day, but it's definitely something I'll be interested to try. Now, yes, you rightly pointed out, shooting videos simultaneously from front and back cameras has been something on Samsung devices for like literally decades and more. That being said, Apple's video quality taking is in general a lot higher than Samsung's. So if they might have like created an maybe they have put dual ISPs into the new iPhone. Who knows, right? Maybe that's the excuse. Maybe it's also not exclusive just to the 17 Pros, but also like older iPhones. Maybe Apple believes they need more memory to shoot simultaneously while preserving video quality and while preserving system responsiveness. That being said, it could, of course, still just be a marketing differentiation, but we'll see it once we actually get to that. So thank you, John. This is actually a pretty well-made video. I do know now that I won't have the time today to react to Marques's Oppo Find X8 Ultra video because we still have so much Apple stuff to cover. And guys, let me know if I said anything crazy in terms of my design takes, or if you have any topics that you definitely want and need me to cover. Yeah, so we have been streaming for about an hour. Seems like all is doing pretty well. Seems like we don't have any dropped frames in an hour of streaming. That's pretty encouraging, and actually makes me very happy that I took my Ethernet dongle along with me. So yeah, I'm very happy with how the stream is working out. Thank you, guys. But obviously we have covered now the iOS 19 redesign. There is actually more, of course, that would follow an iOS 19 redesign, and it's not just iPadOS, macOS, and visionOS is supposed to get a huge visionOS 3 update, but also a question was, how will the Apple Watch operating system, watchOS, get updated? And this is coming from Mark Gurman. So I believe this was in the Q&A section of the Power On newsletter, which technically we could access, but this is something I like being summarized for me. And he was basically asked if we will see similar changes on Apple Watch as we're going to see on iPhones, iPads, and Macs. And apparently, we will be getting some elements new interface elements here and there, but basically nothing crazy, not on the same scale of what's coming in iOS 19. For my own personal prediction, I would expect, for example, maybe the greatest icon changes to be reflected, though, of course, watchOS does not have to mirror iOS icons one-to-one, and I would expect certain design elements like the new toggles to be pretty much in line. watchOS does not really need a ton of transparency and translucency in that way, but yeah, it will be interesting. Maybe Apple is also targeting a bigger redesign for next year. Yeah, but apparently watchOS and tvOS are not getting the same huge redesigns this year as iOS and iPadOS, and also most likely macOS. Now, let's actually get to more stuff from Mark Gurman. And we are going to start with the next generation of Apple Vision devices, because we are not just talking about a hypothetical Vision Pro 2, but also a product that I have myself dubbed an Apple Vision Air. For one, I think Vision Air is a cool way to call something. But it's also something that would line up very much with Apple's product differentiation that we see on iPad and Mac, and maybe even the iPhone starting this year. But here's Mark Gurman talking about the future of Apple Vision, plus eventually the launch of Apple Glasses. So Siri turnover, we've talked about in the past how Siri was handed over to the previous lead on the Apple Vision Pro team, Rockwell. So that's actually very interesting, because a lot of people have dubbed Vision Pro like a failure. And I find it funny that supposedly this huge failure is Apple. Now Apple is giving like their next big thing, like AI, to the same guy. I just don't think people understand that Vision Pro is not a failure. Vision Pro in its current state, it launched with an M2 chip when M3 was about to come out, or I believe had already come out. It cost an abysmal amount of money, not even considering the fact that it started with 256 gigabytes at the $3,500 pricing, and it still sold roughly 500,000 units, probably somewhere between 300 and 500K. It's hard to tell the exact concrete number, but I just find it funny how like so many people are writing off Vision Pro when Vision Pro is very clearly at this point in time not that big of a deal to Apple. Apple just doesn't see it as either a success or a failure, at least to me. And I think when it comes to the actual hardware and even the platform in of itself, I think they're actually quite happy, because consider just how much more refined Apple Vision Pro feels than a first generation iPad or a first generation iPhone or a first generation Apple Watch for that matter. So again, there is some turnarounds here. That being said, obviously Vision Pro now is also part of all other Apple hardware. So now John Turnus is overseeing that, though they are smaller individual teams working on individual parts of hardware, right? So they're basically maintaining a lot of the internal structure that was set up so many years ago by Steve Jobs. Now Vision Pro is basically moving towards the second generation. Some people have again, this is a lot of speculation here by Mark Gurman. It's always funny how whenever he mentions stuff like this, he never really goes into sources, right? Like, for one, when he mentions product cancellations, right, what does he bring up? He says Apple scraps work on Mac connected augmented reality glasses, which like, oh, big cancellation, I guess. Like, they still pushed out Vision Pro. Right, and engineering snags refer to an article by Mark Gurman himself where he calls out the same AR cancellation as before, and he brings up products that work completely differently than the way Apple would want AR to work, like the Snapchat glasses and whatever. And of course, AI which has nothing to do with the other team. Plus, again, AI is delayed. It's not canceled or anything else like that. So I feel like Mark Gurman, and I'm not asking him to be nice towards Apple, but I feel like sometimes he will just phrase things in the most negative possible way, just so he seems more authoritative and more like analytical, right? It's like, oh, all of those failures of products that like Apple worked on internally, but Apple has always said that they are doing like 1,000 no's for every yes. And that doesn't mean like a no in their head. Sometimes it means actually pushing a product relatively far forward, then seeing, oh, certain text simply isn't ready. Oh, some needs more work, or this concept might not actually work as well as we thought. This is not a bad thing. This is how Apple should behave internally. Now, some of the AI snafus and the delays, it's not great, but it's not an outright failure either. But let's actually get to the Vision Pro, which according to Mark Gurman has been on shaky ground. The company went back to the drawing board to determine if it should launch another model or change the product to gain more consumer interest. This is such a weird concept because, like, a second generation could still be different. Is he saying Apple was debating to change the entire concept? Because glasses, even according to Mark Gurman, are not yet ready. So what other product could Apple give us, like, in exchange for Vision Pro? He's saying it's facing lower cost competition from Meta platforms. It's important to know that this competition basically only exists in the head of analysts, because don't get me wrong, yes, people are buying Meta Quests, but Meta or Facebook loses money on each freaking one that they sell. Plus, it's a very cheap product overall in comparison to what Apple is doing. So yes, while they're technically competition on many levels, it's like, plus even the Meta Quest, by the way, which is selling decently, is actually on shaky grounds. Which there are reports that basically like people internally at Facebook are saying, this is like our last chance this year to sell a lot, to get more people into the Quest ecosystem, to sell them on actual games and like DLC inside those games and stuff like that. Because if we don't make it successful this year, Mark Zuckerberg might not allow us to keep losing money on that product in the future. And if we aren't allowed to lose money on the product, there might not be a chance for us to sell this product, because if we suddenly have to raise prices from $400-500 to $700, we might not see any sales. So yeah, this is something that I believe Mark Gurman just comments on without even fully understanding the situation at Meta. So blah, blah, blah. Apple has, of course, invested a lot in Vision Pro. They have improved functionality, like giving you 5K monitors for your Macs. So according to Mark Gurman, though Apple had previously considered doing a more basic refresh of the current hardware, changing up from M2 to M5, it's now looking to go further. The new plan is to release the model that makes the headset both lighter and cheaper. And this, honestly, this to me screams, Mark Gurman did not know that it was going to be lighter and cheaper, but he knew it was going to be based on M5. So now, instead of saying, oops, sorry guys, didn't know it was going to be lighter and cheaper, guess I did an oopsie, right? He is now saying, oh no, this is totally a big internal change, guys. They really wanted to just make a big chip swap. And to me, it's like, look, I understand. Sometimes Apple just makes a chip swap, right? But think about the change from iPad 1 to iPad 2, right? Which coincidentally, the iPad 1 actually also weighed 1.5 pounds, but then iPad 2 went down to 1.3 pounds. and it simultaneously gave you a chip that was 2 times faster in CPU performance and 9 times faster in GPU performance. And not only was it thinner, but actually the entire shape of the product was different. On iPhone, the iPhone to the iPhone 3G obviously switched to a aluminum-based body to a plastic body. It also introduced a chip swap, the ability to connect to 3G networks, video capture, right? And all of that stuff, it feels like if we were getting those kinds of rumors from Mark Gurman back in the day, he would be saying, oh, the next iPhone is rumored to be getting 3G, right? But then later on, he would be saying, you know what? Internal plans at Apple changed. Now the new iPhone is going to be lighter and cheaper thanks to a plastic build. And the new iPhone is going to also introduce new features like video recording, right? I dislike that when people are like, oh, so much has changed internally at Apple. Like, why wouldn't it have always been a plan for Apple to make a lighter Apple Vision Pro? Like, I just don't get it. Like, maybe Apple had one prototype that just had the chip swap, and maybe another prototype was notably lighter. And Apple internally might have said, you know what, that lighter product, it might use less premium materials, but those less premium materials could actually allow us to reduce the price and make it lighter. You know what, we're gonna go with that one, right? But instead of addressing that very much like real conundrum for Apple, which is constantly having to decide between like a road left or a road right, he's basically pretending like, no, Apple was going down one road, but then they changed it, right? It's like that South Park old guy, right, who's saying like to Butters, oh, I wouldn't go down that road. Or was it that road? Sorry, my voice is a little excited because I am getting my streaming energy back. So, the new plan is to release a model that makes the headset both lighter and cheaper. The current version weighs nearly 1.5 pounds and can often strain a wearer's neck and head. Many people who wait for it long periods of time require third-party straps. Blah, blah, blah. That makes perfect sense. The $3,500 price of the current version is extraordinarily steep. Also correct. Also, don't forget that to get a 1 terabyte Apple Vision Pro, that's now $3,900. Because $3,500 is the price for the 256 gigabyte configuration, then $200 more for 512, and another $200 for 1 terabyte. And I also think that logistically, that makes no sense. Like, I wonder how many 256 gig version Apple even sells. Maybe that's the version like companies go for, like Fortune 500 companies or something like that, because maybe they only want to have one app on it. But like my prediction could be that Apple drops the price by $500 to a cool $29.99, right? But also doubles the base storage to 512 gigabytes. So that makes the 512 gigabyte configuration actually $700 less expensive than before. Again, those are not the kind of details Mark Gurman provides right now, but I don't see it. If it drops to 2,500, I actually think it could lead to a much noticeable increase in market share. But at $3,000, I could still see it working, especially for enterprise customers. So it also makes the Vision Pro more than 7 times the price of MetaQuest headset. One of the new headsets will seek to address these issues, though reducing the cost maybe even more. Of course, yes, there will be tariff impacts too, but I do believe that Vision Pro should be the product that kind of eats tariff impacts, unless, of course, 145% tariffs return. There's no way to eat those kinds of tariffs. The other headset in development could be even more intriguing, and this is where my Vision Air concept comes back. In January, I reported that Apple had scrapped work on augmented reality glasses that would tether to a Mac. Instead, it's now working on a Vision Pro that plugs into a Mac. I'm not sure. basically he is saying it's not a standalone product, right? It's more like a PSVR 2 rather than a Vision Pro. I don't know the point of this kind of product. I mean, this would make it a very niche product. For one, it would be entirely bound to the install base of Macs. Then most Macs are like laptops and more like even MacBook Airs. So I'm not even sure what the exact like market here would be. So I'm not sure. This reads to me like a rumor that Mark Gurman could have gotten wrong. Maybe this product relies on a Mac for higher end compute, maybe like gaming, but don't see it like not at least playing back movies by itself and stuff like that. It's really hard to tell. The difference between the two ideas is the level of immersion. The Cancel device had transparent lenses. The product still in the works will use the same approach as the Vision Pro. He also calls this plugs into a Mac, and obviously glasses tethering, that would be wireless. So is he suggesting this is he's saying the idea is to create an ultra low latency system for streaming a user's Mac display or for connecting to high end enterprise applications. But he says plugs into a Mac right here. Oh, Jesus, Mark, what are you doing to me? Some customers have been using the Vision Pro for things like viewing imagery during surgery or for flight simulators. Those are two areas where a user would want the least amount of lag possible, something that can be guaranteed by a fully wireless system. Yeah, but it should be noted, my cat is way too nervous now. It's like easier to add like hardwired capability to a Vision Pro and sell it as an extra feature than selling a product that only has like hardwired capability. And I mean, if you give the Apple Vision Pro like Wi-Fi 7 and allow peer-to-peer connectivity with a Wi-Fi 7 based Mac, I mean, that's still gonna be great for most people. And then if like the people doing surgery in Vision Pro want to connect it, like why do you need a separate product for that, I wonder? I mean, that product could get a lot cheaper, but now it almost sounds like an enterprise spin-off of the Vision Pro rather than a standalone product. Still, all of this is a stepping stone toward Cook's grand vision, which hasn't changed in a decade. He wants true augmented reality glasses, lightweight spectacles that the customer could wear all day. The AR element will overlay data and images onto real-world views. So, yeah. Apparently, Tim cares about nothing else, says someone with knowledge of the matter. Again, I fully understand that Tim cares about AR, and to me it makes sense. I do believe that something like AR glasses will eventually be the future, but I just don't see the tech being ready right now. So it's kind of pointless. If Apple wants to create a platform that an eventual AR glasses could benefit from, that to me makes a lot of sense. But Apple just caring about AR above everything else, that seems a tiny bit hyperbolic to me. Yeah, but that's about it. I'm not going to read everything, of course. You can go to Bloomberg and read the Power newsletter for yourself. So that's a big thing. Again, going to be interesting when we're actually going to see those products, supposedly sometimes early next year. I guess we'll find out by then. Or maybe in the meantime, Mark Gurman will revise even more of his leaks and rumors. Because don't forget, again, a couple of months ago, the latest position was pretty stern that like, oh, we're only getting a chip swap. No design changes, nothing to even like drastically alter the price. And now we're getting a product that's specifically designed to be lighter and cheaper. So anything can happen in a year or so. But that's not all, because obviously, after talking about iOS redesigns and even watchOS redesigns, let's actually talk about feature changes and specifically about iPadOS 19. Now, of course, iPadOS 19, as you can take from the name, is the operating system powering iPads that is going to be introduced at this year's WWDC. And according to Mark Gurman, Apple readies iPadOS 19 overhaul that will make the tablet software more like macOS. Besides a big effort to make the design of Apple's OS more consistent, a big theme of the upcoming WWDC is likely to be iPad software. I am told that this year's upgrade will focus on productivity, multitasking, and app window management. With an eye on the device operating more like a Mac, it's been a long time coming, with iPad power users pleading with Apple to make the tablet more powerful. Many of them, including myself, just want Apple to put macOS on the iPad. I don't. They won't get their wish, thank God, but the changes will likely go far enough to make a lot of those users happy, at least for now. The revamp is arriving about a year after Apple brought the M4 chip to the iPad Pro, which in my experience seriously makes the device fly. The OLED screen that is very responsive probably helps with that too, Mark. The software also is coming around the time the new iPad Pros with M5 chips are likely to be ready, which is interesting because those are supposed to come out next year, and this is coming this year. But okay, Mark. For years, users have said that it feels like the hardware capabilities of the iPad are well ahead of its software. That could soon be changing. She wants to cuddle, but she's also aggressive as hell. So, she isn't aggressive towards me. She just wants to encourage me to like stand up and basically play with her, or to just shut up because she gets nervous when people talk nonstop. So basically, three things here are important, which is that. Working more like macOS, according to Mark Gurman, will come with three things. Where is that? Multitasking, productivity, and app window management. Obviously, app window management right now is what we refer to as Stage Manager. It's also on the Mac. So if Apple actually designs those systems to work in lockstep and just expands the capabilities of Stage Manager on iPad to be a little bit more free, similar to what it is on macOS, I actually wouldn't be opposed to it, because as most guys who watch my streams might be able to tell, I actually use my Mac with Stage Manager always on, which I don't do on my iPad. On my iPad, I actually prefer like just two apps side by side with maybe one app in slide over. So maybe that could change. The other thing is actually more interesting to me specifically as a streamer. As you guys know, obviously I use OBS on my Mac. It's an app that simply wouldn't be able to work with the background task and audio permission tools inside iOS and iPadOS. So if Apple is really ramping up productivity capabilities, now that could be a very broad statement, including referring to Apple's own first-party applications. But if Apple specifically is working to give iPads, which have the same base amount of memory as M1, M2, and M3 Max, 8 gigabytes, now at least the iPad Pros do, if that is Apple's focus, that to me makes sense, right? Just give the iPad more control and bigger abilities to do background app refreshes or background compute tasks. And with that, make a lot more apps a lot more reliable and maybe feasible in the first place on the iPad. Now, again, productivity is a very broad term that unfortunately Mark Gurman does not elaborate on. But this all together to me suggests that Apple is still thankfully committed to keeping the iPad its own kind kind of experience, its own platform, but they're also willing to get a step closer to a lot of their pro users who are asking for more advanced capabilities to come to iPadOS. If that means that at some point I'll be able to use OBS on my iPad in the same way I do on my Mac, and maybe iPadOS gets even features like deep system extensions, the way that I can have like a better display as an app on my Mac, even cooler, right? I don't think these things are needed for the iPhone. I don't even think they are that 100% necessary on an iPad as they are on a Mac. But hey, if this leads to more success for the iPad, then I'm all here for it, because it's my favorite product by Apple, and it's probably my favorite piece of consumer tech ever. So yeah. This definitely is interesting, even though in typical Mark Gurman fashion, he unfortunately does not go into too many details here. And last but definitely not least, let me actually see if there's also anything else I might have missed while I was streaming. That usually happens a lot. No. So we actually have more leaks for an upcoming iPhone Fold, supposedly launching late next year or early 2027. Who knows? Obviously, stuff like this that is very ambitious, like Apple. She tried to jump, but she jumped from a table she's unfamiliar with, because I took the table she usually jumps on, and she just totally lost it. Jesus, you're a cat. How are you not able to jump? The iPhone Fold. The iPhone Fold is rumored to be have a very interesting form factor in that regard. So while we usually talk about it in very similar styles to like the Galaxy Fold, right? It will have different aspect ratios for its screens, a little bit more reminiscent of what we've seen from like what was it called? Oppo. Oh Jesus. It's not the latest generation. It's not the Find N5. Oppo Passport Foldable. That's not it. That's too new one. Was it even Oppo? Oh, the N2 was it, yeah. But then they actually transitioned to a more Galaxy Fold-like design. So here they actually were trying something a little bit different from the Galaxy look, right? And supposedly, even though in most renders the iPhone still mostly looks more Galaxy Fold-like, it should be actually more similar to this. And we actually have two crucial leaks, or at least like speculations about it. One refers to the resolution of both the internal and the external screens, and the other refers to the use of a supposedly Face ID embedded camera system, right? While it's possible for infrared light to travel through displays, our transmission is extremely poor, which would make face recognition much slower and less reliable than it is now. Apple has previously toyed with selectively deactivating certain pixels in order to improve transmission, but a patent granted yesterday describes a simpler and more reliable approach, removing some subpixels. And supposedly this is coming from Digital Chat Station. Here's a heavyweight exclusive information. Apple folding screen, the inner screen has an under-screen camera. So this is obviously something that we've seen, especially in foldables like the Galaxy Fold. I hope Apple pulls it off better. Now with Face ID, Apple is already working on consolidating a lot of Face ID tech into smaller and smaller pieces. There's also like a question with Face ID, because every leak thus far have talked about the iPhone Fold to be Touch ID based, because obviously you would need only one Touch ID sensor. Well, if you embedded Face ID on like the outer screen, you would still need Face ID on the internal screen. So I'm a little bit confused by the nature of this leak. However, the more interesting talk to me is actually that this leaker is kind of confirming the display sizes that we've talked about in the past, which is an internal screen of 7.8 inches, roughly, and an outer screen of roughly 5.5 inches. Now, I've actually calculated those resolutions. So 713 pixels by 1920 would have a pixel density of 420 ppi. Nice. 420 at a display diagonal of 7.76 inches. And this internal screen, this outer screen of 2088 by 1422 would actually be roughly 460 ppi, which of course would line up perfectly with the current screens we have on iPhones. That to me actually makes a lot of sense. For one, I think that the relatively close nature of some of the resolution here would make it actually capable to work as with iPad apps, probably. The other thing that definitely helps is the fact that this is a roughly 4:3 aspect ratio, which is also something that Apple likes using on iPads. And this outer screen would be almost a 3:2 aspect ratio. It's 1.43 or something like that. So it would actually be a pretty wide screen by most standards, right? Apple has been working on very tall screens for iPhones in recent years. So this would be almost like a return to the older iPhone display style, right? All the way going back to like an iPhone 4 before they switched to a 16:9 aspect ratio. So that is really fascinating. Again, some of the Face ID stuff versus Touch ID, that is also something people bring up here in 9 to 5 Mac. But I guess we'll have to see. To me, the most interesting thing by far here is the actual resolution, that we're getting a little bit closer to truly understanding of what technology is going to be packed into an iPhone Fold. And then finally, some notion of under-screen camera technology, whether or not that refers to Face ID or just the camera itself. It's hard to say. It's also maybe not everything is right now ready for the first generation iPhone Fold. Maybe some changes will be reserved for an eventual like iPhone Fold 2, right? I mean, Apple probably wouldn't want to blow their load right away on everything. But yeah, the resolution makes sense. The pixel density makes sense. The aspect ratio, again, if we think about something like the Oppo Find N2, makes sense. And of course, knowing some previous stuff like roughly a 9mm thickness once folded up, which would be pretty competitive with like today's Oppo Find N5 and the next generation Galaxy Fold. All of that slowly but surely creates a somewhat cohesive picture of an eventual iPhone Fold in my head. And of course, I'll keep covering any kinds of leaks and rumors we'll get leading up to its launch, which is still well over a year away or more. So, big camera bump. Mythic Quest being canceled. Yeah, nothing surprising here. I'll probably talk a little bit more about the iPhone 17 design in maybe like a Wednesday stream. I'll try looking. Maybe I'll be able to stream tomorrow. But yeah, that's about it for today. Otherwise, I'll just risk losing my voice, which is not really something I want to do starting my vacation with. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for leaving generous super chat. Thanks to both Max and Mr. George Best today with €6 and 5 Jordanian dirham super chats. Thank you to anyone who still was able to comment, like Jan. Thank you to anyone who just watched, which I know a lot of you just like watching it afterwards, so that's totally fine by me. As always, of course, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who think might enjoy it. comment. Don't just comment live. Also consider leaving a comment afterwards. You can also, of course, leave a super chat or a super sticker whenever you catch me live. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Max, Angelica, and Steve, all MarkTech Pro Max supporters. I do, for the moment, recommend, if you want to support me directly in the long term, do it as a YouTube channel member, because Patreon is just like, you can join Patreon, especially the free tier there. But if you want the shout outs, if you want all the bonus of being part of the community directly, try doing it here on YouTube. And of course, as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. I guess I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Mark Tech, tuning out. Meow.